Hey guys, Jazz back with another video. In this video, we're going to go over my top 5 most overrated players of all time. Again, this is my personal list. Everybody has a different thing that they look for, so you might have a different top 5 than me. You might think someone I think is overrated isn't overrated. It's everybody's personal opinion. I'm just going to give my top 5. And I just want to preface this by saying this is not that the player was a bad player. It just means he's overrated. Just because he's on this list, I'm not saying this player was a terrible player. I'm just saying that people perceive him to be a better player than he actually was. That's all this is. This isn't throwing shade. Well, it's kind of throwing a little shade at the players, but it's not like, saying that this player is garbage. It's just saying that maybe people think he's a Hall of Fame level type player, and he's really just kind of an average type player, or maybe just like below that legend status that most people put him at. So again, guys, this does not mean the player is a bad player. This is just saying that he is not as good as most people perceive them to be. If you have someone you don't agree with on this list, just comment down below. Maybe say you don't agree with that person, or if you maybe think that there's somebody that I left off the list, feel free to comment that below. Feel free to send it to your friends if you see a player that they like, or somebody that they really root for, or somebody that they really hate. Send it to them so they can see this video. So with that being said, let's just get right into the list. I'm not going to hold you guys up. This is the top 5 most overrated NFL players of all time. Number 5. Hey guys, as you can see, it's Mr. Head and Shoulders himself, Troy Polamalu at number 5. Now, this is not saying that Troy Polamalu was not a good football player. He was a good football player. It's just that a lot of people assume that he was one of the really elite. It used to be him and Ed Reed that used to be talked about as like the best safeties. And I believe Ed Reed was head and shoulders a better player than him. This guy made a lot of big plays. He was a wild animal out there. His hair flying all over the place. He made that goal line play where he dove over right before the snap of the ball. He made highlight crazy plays. The big issue with Troy Polamalu is he was a big liability out there in pass coverage. And the defense was so good that it kind of masked some of his issues. But, I mean, he was exposed on many occasions just getting, blowing the coverage. Basically, he wasn't that instinctive when it came to pass coverage. He was really good playing the run. He made some big plays. Again, he was a small guy, did a lot with his stature. But again, I just believe that they used to compare him to Ed Reed. He wasn't, I don't think, nowhere near the Ed Reed type player, because Ed Reed was great against the run, great against the pass. He was just amazing all-around safety. Troy Polamalu had a lot of deficiencies. And this is what I'm going to do too on most of these players, is compare them to another player who people don't hold as high regards. To me, Bob Sanders was a better safety when healthy. Obviously, Bob Sanders had trouble staying healthy, but when he was healthy, he was a better player than Troy Polamalu. But everybody who was a casual fan in the early 2000s, they know who Troy Polamalu is. They know the hair. They know the guy. I mean, obviously, his teams won a lot. But if you ask people, most likely, if they heard of Bob Sanders, if they're a casual football fan, they don't know who you're talking about. But Bob Sanders was a better safety than Troy Polamalu. But obviously, injuries and the fact that he just didn't have the personality that Troy Polamalu had, just doesn't have him star power, especially with defense when his stats are not like that crazy, stat numbers, for like a defensive end and stuff like that are big numbers that people look at. But really for safeties and stuff, there's no true standout numbers that people look like that was an amazing stat for a safety, because you can have a lot of picks and be a bad safety. You can have a lot of fumbles for us and actually be a bad safety, because there's a lot more that goes into just the raw stats. I believe Troy Polamalu was a good player. He just wasn't an all-time great player. He might be a Hall of Famer. He might go to the Hall of Fame, but I don't believe he was a Hall of Fame type player. Again, because those positions are harder to judge, and a lot of people, he has a big name. He was on the cover of Madden one year, so he does have a lot of fame, but I believe he was I do believe he was overrated for the production that he actually gave. Number 4. As you guys can see, you have Brett Favre here. He was the all-time leader in touchdown passes. Obviously, Peyton Manning surpassed him. He had a great career. He won a couple MVPs. He won a Super Bowl. Not saying he was a bad quarterback. Again, I'm just going to preface this because a lot of people are going to probably come after my head, Packers fans and whatnot. He was a great quarterback. I'm just saying he's overrated. He's not a top 5 quarterback. To me, he's not even a top 10 quarterback. He's still one of the great quarterbacks of all time. He is just not up there. Some people put him 3, 4, as high as 3. Some people put him 2. I mean, I just don't think he's that. He was a gunslinger. Yes, at one point he was the all-time passing touchdowns leader, but as you can see to the right, he had 336 interceptions. That is the all-time record as well. He had 166 fumbles. the all-time record as well. So he turned the ball over at an alarming rate. Me personally, I like the quarterbacks who maybe have like a 3-to-1 interception ratio at least. He didn't really even have a 2-to-1 interception ratio. Don't get me wrong, Brett Favre was a great player. When he went to the Jets, he actually elevated them until he got hurt. They were looking like a Super Bowl contender. So the guy is a great quarterback. I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying the gunslinger mentality. I can't have like that type of player who's a boomer bust. Like he had the game against the Rams where I think he threw 4 or 5 interceptions in a playoff game. Those type of performances, and it was indoors. Those type of performances, like I mean, I can understand if it was bad weather, but super elite quarterbacks, when you're separating them like hair thin things, interceptions and throwing so many interceptions and being so like up and down, you never know what type of quarterback you're going to get. Obviously, yeah, Peyton Manning had his bad games, but he would never throw 4 or 5 picks in a playoff game indoors. I just can't picture that from Peyton Manning. So I just think he was overrated by some. Some people really have him labeled as a gunslinger and just really put him down on the list. But there's some people who look past that. He has like that charming personality, and they look past it and bump him up in the list, put him in the top 5 quarterbacks. He's just not on that level. To me, he's not even a top 10 quarterback. Yes, he has like the stats. Again, he played for a very long time, so you're going to accumulate a lot of numbers. But, I mean, all these quarterbacks like Drew Brees and stuff are going to pass those numbers because they're also accumulating a lot of stats as the years go by. And passing the ball becomes easier and easier throughout the league with the changing the rules. So, again, Brett Favre, great quarterback, just not for me a top 10 quarterback where some people have him slotted up there. I don't believe he's that. He had way too many turnovers, in my opinion, to be labeled as a super elite. Again, we're separating, the top tier of the elite quarterbacks, okay? So that's just what I'm saying. He's overrated in terms of where he's listed by a lot of people. Number 3. As you can see, number 3 is Michael Vick. This will be a controversial one to some and a no-brainer for others because there's some people who really love Michael Vick. And I understand because he had those flash plays, those big 80-yard runs, those runs against the Vikings where he made 2 defenders hit himself. I mean, he was one of the most electrifying players to ever wear a helmet in the NFL. But he is very overrated by a lot of people. Some people obviously don't have him rated that high because they think of him as a mobile quarterback who couldn't really win big games. He did win big games because he was the first quarterback to win at Lambeau Field. But a lot of people just don't think he was a good enough passer to win consistently in the league, which kind of proved out throughout time. As you can see his numbers, he was barely had more touchdowns than interceptions. In 115 starts, he only had 115 TDs, but he did have monster rushing yards, which is what people go after. I mean, he had 6,000 rushing yards. There's a lot of big-time running backs in their careers that didn't have those type of rushing stats. So he does have crazy rushing stats for a quarterback. That we can all agree on. He has insane rushing stats. Problem is his passing stats aren't that great. Problem is that a lot of years he was just up and down. His teams only had a couple of good years in him. I think he had like 3 or 4 real good years where the team actually played good as well. Here's the thing with Vick. A lot of people have him like as their favorite, which is understandable, but there's people that have him as a top 5 quarterback, which is incredible to me, but there are people out there that have him as a top 5 quarterback just because of his rushing abilities. And to me, he believes he's a Hall of Famer. And what I'm going to do with Vick, just because his rushing stats look so crazy, I'm going to compare him to Cam Newton. Because we're going to compare the stats side by side. And you can see there are not a lot of people who hold Cam Newton in the Hall of Fame regard. So we're going to compare their stats. And you'll see that in less games, he is about as productive or more productive than Michael Vick. So I just really don't see it. Plus, Cam Newton won an MVP. Plus, Cam Newton took his team to the Super Bowl, which Michael Vick did not. But to me, I still feel like Michael Vick is held at a higher standard than Cam Newton, but their stats don't show it, and their production on the field in terms of wins and where they take their teams don't show it either. All right, guys, sorry I had to get my ugly mug out the face, but as you can see, Michael Vick on the left side, he has 115 games compared to Cam Newton's 94 games, 133 touchdowns to 138. Again, Cam Newton's played a year and basically a half less games than him, so in a year and a half, it'll be better comparison because they'll have a similar amount of games, and I'm sure Cam Newton will probably have like 160-something touchdowns, probably like 90-something interceptions. He'll have way more passing yards than Michael Vick. He has a better quarterback rating. As you can see, 6 points higher. Rushing stats, he is lower than Michael Vick, but by the time he plays a year and a half more, he'll probably have 4,000-something rushing yards, so it won't be that drastically of a difference. And Cam Newton has a lot more rushing touchdowns. He'll probably have around 50-some, 60 rushing touchdowns by the time the games even out. So as you guys can see, the numbers are pretty much equal. If I would say Cam Newton has played the better position of quarterback, he is more efficient in terms of passing the ball. He scores more rushing touchdowns. Yes, he has less rushing yards, but they asked him to run the ball a little bit less than They asked Michael Vick, and Michael Vick was just a more explosive runner, let's be honest. But here's what the difference. Cam Newton has won an MVP. Michael Vick has 0 MVPs. Cam Newton has been to a Super Bowl. Michael Vick never went to a Super Bowl. And this is just comparing them to a player that basically is the same, similar type of player, but is not held in the same regards, even though he has better stats and basically better accomplishments than Michael Vick. And I understand Michael Vick was a pioneer. He's like one of the first running quarterbacks, like pure running quarterbacks to take it out. Cam Newton is not a pure running quarterback, but he is a mixture of both. He's the closest thing that I can find to Michael Vick. And to me, he has better stats, better accomplishments, yet held in a lower regard than him. And that's where I get to the point that Michael Vick is overrated, because people rate him as one of the premier quarterbacks, when in all actuality, Cam Newton's a better player and held in a lesser regard. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with that statement. It's all relative. Again, the stats are very similar, but again, Cam to me has better stats and more accomplishments and is held in a less regard. So that's easy, as an easier comparison for you to see visually to understand where I'm coming from. Number 2. All right, guys, as you can see, number 2 is Bo Jackson. Obviously, he was a physical freak. He played 2 sports at the same time, so he wasn't even a full-time football player. He only played for about 66% of the seasons when he did play. Most games I think he played was 12. He only played in 4 seasons, so I did put that up there. And most of the seasons he played partial, but again, because he only played once the baseball season was over. So again, I can't give somebody a pass. It's like they do it in rap, like they gave Biggie and Tupac, even though they had short careers, as labeled the greatest of all time, even though they never proved throughout that they could do a full career of being on top. So that's why you can't do that with sports. You can't just okay, if he would have played full time, he would have had X amount of stats, and he would have did this, would have did that. He would have, had 20,000 rushing yards. You don't know that he would have did that. But I'm just going to compare him to another player soon for you to understand where I'm coming from. I'm comparing to a player who has better stats than him, but again, is not held in the same regards. But as you guys can see right here, he has 2,782 rushing yards, only 16 touchdowns. 5.4 yards per carry is really great. 40 receiving yards, 352 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Again, decent stats, really good stats, but again, not overpowering stats as people make him out to be like he was this god. He never had more than 5 rushing touchdowns, never had 1,000 yards rushing. Again, people, when they think of Bo Jackson, they think of this guy who ran over the league and no one could stop. But he had a couple of great beastly games, but his career wasn't all that people think it was. Yes, his career was cut short by a knee injury. He blew out his knee, and back then, when you blew out your knee and stuff like that, that's basically was a wrap for your career. But again, you can't just, say that he would have did this, he would have did that. If he would have been he wasn't a full-time player. He didn't play his whole career. We just go by what he showed when he was on the field. And yes, he was a very productive player, but he wasn't as overpowering as people think. If you look at these numbers, they don't scream like Hall of Famer in the most amazing 4 seasons. Let's extrapolate it to 10 years. He would have been a Hall of Famer. You can't extrapolate those numbers. They're not that great. And I'm going to show you, the 5.4 yards per carry is great. That is elite status. That is elite. But the rest of the stats aren't that crazy. And I'm going to compare him to a player that a lot of people will be like, yeah, he was a pretty good player, but they don't consider him an elite, oh my God type player. And then I'm going to see where you guys' minds are at. All right, guys, again, I had to get my ugly mug out the face for you guys to see where I'm see the numbers. Again, this is Bo Jackson compared to Jamaal Charles. Now, a lot of people think Jamaal Charles is a good running back, really good running back, but nobody consider him like a Bo Jackson type, okay? So let's just look at the numbers. 2,782 rushing yards compared to 7,260 rushing yards. Again, I know Jamaal Charles played more games, but I'm just doing this by comparison. 16 rushing touchdowns to 43 rushing touchdowns. 5.4 yards per carry to 5.5 yards per carry. 40 receptions to 285 receiving receptions. 352 receiving yards to 2,457 receiving yards. 2 touchdowns to 20 touchdowns. And again, Jamaal Charles is not regarded as like an all-time legend or anything like that. He is a great running back. He is one of the fastest, and he is a speed demon. But he's not regarded in the same breath that Bo Jackson is. But if you look at the raw numbers, there is no comparison. And Jamaal Charles is an often injured running back. If he was healthy, he would have put up monster yards. But this is the guy who should be elevated, because when he was on the field, he was super productive. He was often injured. Bo Jackson was playing on a sport. I get it. He only played 4 seasons. I get that, but he had a small sample size. Not like Jamaal Charles, who had a huge sample size of him dominating, putting up numbers. He's not held in a high regard, yet Bo Jackson is looked at like a greatest. Again, Bo Jackson was a great athlete, but I'm telling you, I'm comparing his running back prowess, not his athletic prowess in multiple sports and just how great of an athlete he was. I'm just saying how great of a running back he was. Obviously, if you go by sheer athleticism, you're going to say Bo Jackson was the better athlete. But here we're talking about who's the better running back, and Jamaal Charles, to me, is a better all-time running back than Bo Jackson. And the numbers don't lie. Again, let me know down below if you agree or disagree with this one. Number 1. All right, guys, so number 1 on the list is Broadway Joe Namath. Again, this guy's stats, when you look at it, most of you guys will agree just by the stats. But again, you got to compare. The NFL is completely different now than it was back then. Obviously, back then it was more of a running league. Again, back then they used to let the D-backs molest the wide receiver, just grab on them, tug on them. It was a lot different league. Through the years, every decade, the passing game has gone easier and easier because they've adjusted the rules to make the game more aesthetically pleasing for people to watch. People want to see high-scoring games, people going up and down. So what they did is they changed the rules. They changed the hitting rules. They changed the, you can't touch at the 5 yards. You can't do this. Again, a lot of rules. Again, a lot of rules built to make the passing game a lot easier. But again, even for his era, he didn't have great stats. He had 173 touchdowns, passing touchdowns, 220 interceptions, 2,700 yards, 50% completion, 65 QB rating. These stats right here will be impossible to accumulate in the NFL today. Why? Because after 2 or 3 years and you're putting up numbers like this, you're cut and you're out of the league. So, again, it's a different league. I understand that Joe Namath was a great college quarterback at Alabama. He was one of the biggest talents to ever come out of college. Yes, a lot of people liked his athleticism. He was a great player for his era. But, again, I don't even think he was a Hall of Famer for his era. Again, played in New York. He's Broadway Joe. Had the a huge personality, made the guarantee, won the Super Bowl II, which gave legitimacy to the AFL. So he did a lot of things which make him a Hall of Famer, obviously, because when the AFL merged with the NFL was looked at as the smaller league, and he actually guaranteed to win the Super Bowl because the Super Bowl was basically both of the leagues playing each other, AFL and the NFL. And the first, I think, 2 years, AFL got dominated, so everybody thought that basically it was just the NFL playing with a minor league on the other side. But then he guaranteed that the AFL, that his team was going to win the Super Bowl. They did, prove them wrong, and it kind of gave legitimacy to the AFL. So for that, obviously, he deserves a lot of respect. But again, his play on the field isn't that great. So people hold him in high regards for all those things. Again, he brought the Jets a Super Bowl, their only Super Bowl. New York, Broadway. He had a huge personality. He was a mega star, but his stats don't really back up where some people put him. Some people have him as their favorite. Obviously, there are people who are going to think he's their favorite quarterback. As a Jets fan, so some Jets fans, yes, Joe Namath was probably their favorite quarterback. Again, if you look at his stats, even compared to his era, they were not that good. So, Joe Namath, you are the most overrated player of all time. If you guys agree with anything on the list, disagree with anything on the list, make sure to comment down below. I appreciate any responses I get down below. If you guys have any friends who their favorite players are on this list or players they hate, they love, or whatever, send them this list, see what they think about it. And that's pretty much it, guys. Till next time, if you guys like the video, please make sure to leave a like down below. If you are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe. Till next time, guys.